So I'm very pleased to be here for the second time. In my speech here tomorrow, I will focus on a kind of embodied dialogues. I say some words in the beginning of open dialogue, but very shortly, because I think that my focus will be more on open dialogue practice in the workshop for tomorrow. But now I chose to speak of the subject that I wanted to speak. Many times when we have presentation, we speak what we have to speak, and then we speak what we want to speak. And now I've chosen to speak what I want to speak. So that, of course, I will also speak of open dialogue, but I'm very thrilled of this idea of embodiment in the practice, and I think that when we speak of dialogical practice, it's very embodied practice, and now when we have access also to a kind of new research of embodied action and how do they interact with each other, we have new access of something new that contributes all the psychotherapy. But first of open dialogue, some words. Open dialogue was a psychiatric practice that was first initiated in the Finnish Lapland, in the southwestern part of Finnish Lapland, in a small province. And since about 30 years ago, and it has been all the time, it's all the time going on. And lately it has aroused a lot of interest throughout the world. That makes me very happy. During the years, we developed a kind of guidelines of this practice, which means that optimal practice in psychiatric care should guarantee immediate response within 24 hours after contact. We should be together with the family and the rest involved. And second aspect, always start from the social network perspective, meaning including the family of our clients and working together with all the professionals and other relevant parties of the life of the patients. Thirdly, it means it adapts an idea to always to adapt to the specific needs of the clients instead of applying some ready-made program. So being flexible in integrating the different methods of the treatment. Open dialogue is not a treatment method because it takes use of all the forms of psychotherapy, occupational therapy, rest of the therapies that we need in meeting with people with several mental problems. It's an idea to guarantee the responsibility and availability of the professional by the idea that in our geographic catchment areas in which we have full responsibility of the practice, the idea is that whoever is contacted is responsible to organize the meeting for the clients. It's no longer allowed to say to the client, this belongs not to us, you have to take contact with the abuse clinic, for instance. Of course, it's a very challenging task, but that's guaranteed the people to be met in their first life. I'm involved, for instance, in one practice that is going on in Brno in northern Norway, and they have a very beautiful saying. When they are contacted with the patients, with the families, they always say, welcome, you come to our place. And of course that's the best way to start for people, instead of saying that you have to have a contact with some other place. The fifth idea is to guarantee the psychological continuity across the boundaries in our treatment system, across the boundaries between outpatient and inpatient care, but also across the boundaries between social care and psychiatry and other psychiatry, whatever and the boundaries, and make it possible to have integrated teams that are formed by therapists, one from mental health outpatient clinic and perhaps the second one from psychiatry. All in all, these practical guidelines are needed to build up a process that tolerates uncertainty, because now we do not aim at rapid conclusions or rapid solutions about the problem, but instead we want to have a new form of life in which we can live together to the solutions. And for tolerating this uncertainty, what is needed to have dialogue, the main focus in the meetings. The meetings that we have with the clients is not primarily aimed at removing the symptoms or having a change in family interaction, but it's more a kind of idea to have new language, new words for those experiences that did not yet have words. This practice we have been studying since '88, and it's all the time ongoing research in northern Lapland in Finland. I suppose maybe this is the most scientifically studied psychiatric practice in the world, because I've not seen any other places in which research is so permanent there. One part of the studies has focused on first-time psychotic patients. How do they manage? We had first a large study following 5 years, and because we were part of a Finnish national study project, we did not start antipsychotic medication, because one idea was to have information what is the place of medication in the treatment of psychotic problems. And as a surprise to us, it came out that only 1/3 of the patients needed antipsychotic medications, and perhaps partly because of that, and of course, I suppose very much because of this focus on dialogue, they managed very well. More than 80% did not have any remaining psychotic symptoms, and more than around 85% returned to full employment after 5 years. This is very extraordinary compared to any treatment system of psychosis, because we know that between 60 to 70% of first-time psychotic patients are retired after 2 years already. This is all different, and this has also caused some criticism that we have. Someone has caused us that we have included the most severe cases. Partly because of that, but mainly because of our own research. We did the same research after 10 years to see if this is all the time going on, and we got the very same outcomes. 1/3 was on medication, 84% would return to full employment. But in addition, there were very interesting changes also that we noted. And one of the changes was that when this province of Western Lapland has been very high incidence of schizophrenia area, in the mid of 80s there was 33 new schizophrenia patients per 100,000 inhabitants. In 20 years it had declined to 2. And because no other primary changes has happened in the society, we can make a strong hypothesis that the way we organize psychiatric system seems also to have an effect how people are suffering of mental health crisis. So there are some very extraordinary outcomes of this dialogical practice, and my interest is to ask why dialogue is so powerful. And I suppose, that's my hypothesis, that in dialogue and in dialogical practice, some of that kind of resources of the life, of the families, of our clients become mobilized that we were not used to think before this new kind of practice. And why is dialogue so powerful? I think that one part of the power of the dialogue is that it's much more profound idea of life than we were used to think. I have 4 kind of pre-assumptions of life, of relational life. First, what we know that when we born in the world, we born into relations. And we are constructed of those relations that we experience from the very first minute of our life. So it's better, instead of speaking that we are subjects, so there has been used the word inter-subjects, perhaps there will be also better words, but to highlight that the primary thing of human being is not something that happens inside, but something that happens in between, and also that happens inside, it's something that actually has happened in between. And that's made, as William said, used to say, as a flow of systems. Life is living in that way, in the polyphony of voices that comes out of the experiences of the relations that we have, and when it is dealing with polyphony, life is having dialogue between the voices. For me, the most important author here is a Russian philosopher, Mikhail Bakhtin, who was early on to realize the idea of dialogue. And Mikhail Bakhtin said that dialogue is not mainly communication. Dialogue is much more profound idea of human life. life. As he said, to live means to participate in dialogue, to ask questions, to hear, to respond, to agree, and so on. Then a sentence what I love. In this dialogue, a person participates wholly and throughout his whole life, with his eyes, lips, hands, soul, wherever it is, spirit, with his whole body and feet, with whole body and spirit. Dialogue is a process of formation of as human being happening in relationship. And these ideas that Bakhtin was introducing already in the early 1900s, so now has become also evident in the research that has been done. And for me, of course for many others, it's very important research that has been done in the area of intersubjectivity. Looking at the communication, what happens with the newborn baby and grown-up. And for me, the most important research has been done with the Scottish professor Colvin Trevarthen, who started this research late 80s, early 70s. Colvin Trevarthen is a biologist, he's not a psychologist. And he said that they were very surprised because they wanted to look what happens in the communication between a newborn and a grown-up, and they did not find any research, any description about it. And perhaps the background is that we are so much colored by the Sigmund Freud's idea that during the first months of life there is no psychological life. So a child is psychologically empty, living in a symbiosis or in autistic situation, and actually verified with the Swiss developmental psychologist Jean Piaget, who actually said the same. But Colvin Trevarthen with the team noticed the opposite. They said they realized that from the very first on, newborn baby is an active participant, active initiative taker in a dialogical relation. And later on, for instance, by the studies by Colvin Trevarthen is speaking very much of this tonal quality of the interaction. He's saying that life is not psychology, life is music. He very much liked to show a film of a 21 days old baby and a mother. And he says, look at this baby and the mother, they compose a symphony of 4 pieces that last for 29 seconds. The symphony can be started by the side of the baby, giving a sound. And the mother is responding, what are you trying to say to me? And the mother is going on, what about this? And the baby follows. And this is the first, what we do in life, or second life. And this is the fascinating part of this all. When we are born, we learn to breathe. But the second thing we learn to be in dialogue. Because dialogue is an innate capacity for human being. It's the most basic idea of human life. And of course, dialogue don't happen alone. Dialogue is being connected with the other ones. Michael Bakhtin says the same thing once. He said that we cannot be known of ourselves by ourselves. We need the other one. I need your eyes to see myself. I borrow your eyes to see myself. And when I look myself in your eyes, it's not a kind of reflective idea, but it's a very non-mediated response that happens in milliseconds. There is no reflection, there is no language. It's a kind of dance that we start to dance with. And we are all the time from the very beginning in this dance throughout the life. In mirror research and other research, there's so much more verification also of these ideas, and there is studies who say that the brain is developing in a dialogue. Brain is very dialogical organ and it's developing in a dialogue. It's not the organ that guides our behavior as a center, but it's an organ that is all the time connected with the context and with the surroundings. Daniel Stern, who unfortunately died last November, was very thrilled because his background is psychoanalysis and he became very critical of psychoanalysis. And he used the word that we are living in revolution. The new view assumes that the mind is always encoded and made possible by the sensory motor activity of the body. For me, this is very important. But for me, the basic, more basic idea is to look at the multi-actor setting, not to look at the dyadic setting, because I have an assumption that life, by its very nature, it's not a dyadic. It's more, of course, it's also, it's dyadic also, but it's from the very beginning a kind of multi-perspective, multi-voice, polyphonic experience of life. And that's something we need to take into account. So we are living in a polyphony of the voices. Everything that we experience, every relation that we experience in life leaves a sign in the memory of our body in some way. Not a memory that is there as a fixed form, but in those sensory elements of our functions. And when we meet with clients, this is a very, this is quite naive picture of the idea, but for me this is what this is all about, doing psychotherapy, and this is what it's all about, meeting families. This is a question of meeting with the guy who is up there and who's severely depressed, his wife Finika, their 2 grown-up children, and 2 or 3 therapists. We also had students with us as a therapy. So these are the voices that we meet with each other, it's kind of embodied voices. And we usually think that this is the social network or this is the family meeting. But in addition, there is much more and deeper and more interesting world that we meet, because every one of us has the voices of our life. Mikko was speaking of his situation in the working place. He had somatically ill, and when he returned to work, he realized that the employer no longer wants his back. And he became in several crises. And a lot of the voices we discussed related with the work, his profession, his relations with the workmates, his relations with the boss who want to beat him out, and so on. Very much of the voices related with his experiences with his family, what kind of son has he been to the parents, and how the parents had a specific life in which their father was excluded from the family. And he had a lot of voices, what kind of father he is, and so on. His wife was very much interested of her siblings, the voices related with her relation with her sisters and brothers, and also because they actually had quite unhappy marriage. That was about being in a marriage with a depressed man and so not so happy. And when we take us as a therapist, they become more interesting because for us the situation is the very same. As I met with a man who had committed several suicide attempts as a family therapist, as a psychologist, I know I have a professional and ethical duties there. The professional voices are there all the time. When I got my training as a systemic family therapist early 80s, this was the focus, be neutral, to have the curiosity, not be involved in your personal voices. But now I think the opposite. Because the more dialogical we become in the practice, the more the voices of my own life are there also. When Mikko speaks of her relation to his father and mother, the voices of my own life, what is my relation to my father? When Mikko speaks when his father died, the voices what I had when my father died are there, and so on and so on. All the voices. But again, I very seldom, almost never, say something of my own life. This is not the way to be in the dance, but it's the way we are in the embodied dance. How do I look with him, at him when he's speaking of a very, very emotion-loaded issue? Can I tolerate that? Am I fine with that? Am I open in my body, or do I close myself? And all those ideas are part of this embodied dance that we dance together. And there is a lot of research showing that this is the most important part of psychotherapy. More important part than the subject of speak. What do we speak about? Going on a bit of this in the subject, only some words. Mihail Bahtin said that when we think of language, we are not subjects in the language only in a physiological way, not in a way that I could deliver to you what I think in my mind. At the very moment when I say something, when I, for instance, use the word depression, it's not possible for me to submit my idea of depression to you, but what happens, all the voices in your idea, in your mind, of that become very active, and in that way we always become co-authors of the idea. And this co-authoring of the story happens in the very in the moment, at the present moment. Once, I have often used a phrase, we are living in a once occurring event of being. Everything happens only once, and everything needed is in this happening. We do not need this very thorough description of the patients in the patient reports, or we do not so much need of the anamnestic interview, because everything what is needed is present in this moment, the history, the present, and of course the future that we anticipate in our actions. And the task becomes to be awake in this moment. Daniel Stern even defined how long is the present moment, and he said that it's approximately 3 seconds. And I like the idea, because it says to me that I have to be awake during the 3 seconds time during which the most important ideas are delivered. My good friend Tom Andersen, during the last years of his life, Tom Andersen was the father of reflective processes, reflective team idea in family therapy. He was very occupied of the third kind of reality, when he said that in addition to that reality in which we think that it's either or, we come to both and, in which we are interested in all the voices, there is this reality of neither nor. He said it's neither that nor that, but I know that there's something happening here. It's my embodied participation, a shared experience. Daniel Stern used the formulation that we have to move from the explicit knowledge to implicit knowing, to what happens in the relation, and only very small part of that knowing becomes ever formulated in the spoken narratives. In a way, we live in two simultaneous stories at the same time. 6-7 years ago, I was actually only interested of the second part of the narratives that the people tell to each other, and what kind of meaning we give to the narratives in a dialogue. What kind of response? Dialogue is a discipline of response. What kind of response do we give to each other? But now I realize that much more primarily is what is said in the first point. The embodied living in the present moment is always a shared experience. It's a kind of, as you said, implicit knowing, even if I don't actually like the word implicit, but perhaps it's illustrative to use that word. And it may also include some of the comments that we made of the present moment. Meaning, for instance, asking our clients, how do you feel at the moment when you speak of this experience? That is the way to have the present moment also in our speech. Michal Bahti, in a way, concluded what it's all about in dialogical practice when he said that for human being there is nothing so terrible than the lack of response. So now I know that our task is currently response, and that's what is needed, nothing else. We are so occupied of all the other things. I was so occupied when I was a systemic family therapist of having circulars interviewing or having positive connotation or whatsoever definition of the idea, without realizing that in dialogical practice the response has happened before we come to think about it. And that's the challenge to us. How to move from the idea that we have to be the therapist who give meaning for the stories of the clients, come to be a participant in the shared moment of being, and how our embodied presence be response to our clients, and that's what is needed. It's only very shortly a story of family that we have met many years, only a few times a year, but they want to come because they said that they can speak with each other. When they came, there was this daughter of the family, 46 years of age, who wanted the consultation because she said that they never had spoken of their life. 40 years ago, her father died all of a sudden in the middle of the night. She was 6, her brother was 10, and after the brother became an idol for this little girl. But when he was 15, she was 11, all of a sudden he stopped school, traveled to Mediterranean, and when he returned, had totally changed. Perhaps had started to use drugs, step by step became psychotic, and was institutionalized, hospitalized since he was 21, and actually has been in institutions since 35 years, 30 years, 35 years. And now when we started to discuss, it's very sensitive movement because mother don't want to have the talk, but she comes. And she don't dare to say her experiences, and for the first time, some 2 years ago, she said this short sequence. First time she put words to her experiences. She said, I've not been recognized. And then I repeated her words, you have not been recognized. By the way, in my dialogical practice, I repeat a lot what people say. Throughout my life, I've been excluded from the family, and at last I want to get rid of this symbioticness. Then I repeated, throughout your life, I've been excluded from the family. Then you said, at last I want to get rid of this symbiotic mess. It sounds like you are saying two things at the same time. Being excluded, being in the symbiotic mess. It came long silence, 10 seconds. And she said, yes, that's what I said. But so far I can't say anything about it. And for me, this is the most important research of style. What happens when we repeated her words and said, it sounds like you said two things. It has been so easy to fill that with words. It's understandable that you have such a conflictual experience because life has been so tough for you. But when we managed to stay silent, she heard her own words. And dialogue became possible. It became possible to have words for her experiences that never before had words. Actually, we met with this family this week on Tuesday, and now she has become much more reflective in her way of being. In the very end, I say some words of this new idea, because I'm so fascinated and thrilled of the ideas of embodiment. We also now have originated a new research project to see what actually happens in the family therapy dialogues. We invite a couple and 2 therapists, and we look precisely at the dialogue, what happens. We have six cameras, 2 of them looking at the entire session, and 4 of them looking at the face of everyone. We have a measurement of autonomic nervous system, both the therapist and the clients at the same time, and try to find out what happens in the moments of change. There are some studies already who have done this kind of work in individual settings. And what has been found on the whole is that the patient responds more to how the therapist says than what the therapist says. But some studies focusing also this synchronization and attunement to each other. And what they say is that synchronization of the body movements increase alliance and good outcome in individual cycles. The more the therapist synchronizes his or her movements with the movements of the client, the better outcome. The better alliance, the better outcome of the therapy. There has been some analysis of the facial expression. Actually, the facial expression is the most, it's the best sign of the alliance between, also in couple therapy settings. And it's very fascinating because you can see that 2 of these people are smiling to each other and the rest are very serious. And you realize that this is not perfect alliance between the therapists. Smiling is perhaps the main affect regulation that we use in the meeting. This is a picture of the setting that we have of the 6 cameras and this one. Very first idea in which we only looked how do the high frequency heart rate variation be connected with each other as a surprise and actually not a surprise. They seem to be a different kinds in specific moments. And we also have been going, these are not any kind of results because these are only first observations that we have been doing of the embodied way of being in action, in relation with each other. If I would have time, so I would talk about these clients who in the have a pointer, but you see the highest point. This is an analysis of the kind of stress factor that includes all the heart rate and the breathing and some other aspects as a kind of scoring. And the highest point in this session, actually he's speaking of some experience he never before had spoken. Actually, we were very happy because this was the most important session in her psychotherapy on the whole, and she spoke of the experience that actually some years ago she realized that her father is not her father. And the first time she managed to put that into the words. And then one part of our research is always have a kind of interview after, a day after, we call it stimulated recall interview, in which we look at that part of the day, and it was so fascinating because he said that oh, that was the thing what I said. I don't remember what I said. I know that I said something important, but I don't remember what I said. So she was speaking something that is in her memory of her body, but it was so profound that only one day after she did not have possibility to remember what was. And at the same time, when we look, the therapist's heart rate was able to start to arise before, 1 second before we come into this subject. Okay, but I'm coming to end of my presentation. And when we think of these ideas being present in the moment, so perhaps we can find some very simple guidelines now following the idea that we are not so much focusing on what kind of meaning should we give to the stories of our clients, but much more how to share the situation. So, first simple idea is that when always in dialogue, in any kind of dialogue, we make choices. What do we comment? What do we respond? And as a part of this process, I have started to prefer to respond to something that happens here and now at this moment. For instance, an emotion that emerges while speaking of some issue, instead of the narrative podcast. Of course, there are situations in which it's very important to comment the narrative of what has happened, but a kind of changing perspectives. Be very careful of following clients' words. For my practice, I repeat word by word what people say, a lot. Word by word what people say. And I'm very careful to put my own initiatives or my own ideas or own meaning. And if I say it, I warn them. Now I say something that perhaps may sound very stupid, but I got an idea. So I want to be very precise that we follow the words and utterances. Not paraphrasing, but exactly by saying words. Always guaranteeing responding to the utterances. Respond can be that I recognize by something I heard what you said, but I don't interrupt the ongoing dialogue that I have with husband and the wife. But that's my main task in the meeting. Guarantee response that people have experienced, that they have taken seriously, they have heard. And in my hypothesis, this is what we do in psychotherapy. It's not so much for skillful interpretations or meaning making, but responding. In some way saying to our clients, I hear what you say and what you say is important. It is. Nothing else is needed. because this is the experience that the people suffering of problems don't have. Noting the different voices, the inner and outer, the inner voices comes out, of course, in the emotional reactions, or if all of a sudden in the middle of the speak up, I don't find words. Now I know that there is some of the inner voices that is here, so I need to stop perhaps, have a place, going silent, and so on. Listen to my own embodied reaction. How do I feel here or wherever I feel it? Having reflected talks with my colleagues in every meeting when we have more than one there, speaking in a dialogical form, and perhaps one of the most important, the last one, allowing silences, proceeding peacefully. Silence is very good for the dialogue. Without silence, you can have dialogue. You can have silence without dialogue, but not text. Silence is the break before words, between words, breaks between utterances are needed. And this is going to have slower than we have. In the end, the slide that I always show in the end of my presentation, because I think that what happens when we come to work in this dialogical way, we move from a kind of methodological orientation into an orientation in which our practice is based more on a kind of basic human values. And of course there is no more basic human value than that. And what I realized many times in the families who have been disconnected in this kind of dialogical meeting, perhaps some of the loving connection they had before with each other reappeared. And of course that is the healing moment.